Welcome to the Black Tower. I'm your host, your guide, your brother, the Sorcerer Armanasul. So it's been a while since I've done a video. Been a little bit better than a week, I suppose, I reckon. But in that time, I've taken the time to do some further research study and making sure that I got the material right. In this one, we're going to continue with the Urillia Text Explained Part 3. Alright, so you have your handy dandy copy of the Necronomicon. Gonna be using it. Okay, let me start off by saying a few things. Okay, first off, in the working the Urillia, there are a few things you need to understand. First off, though we are delving into the subconscious, into the darkness and so forth and so on, it's important to know that the only true demons that abide there, the only true dangers, are the ones that you bring with you. Hopefully by this time you will have, been working through yourself and all this workings and stuff to cleanse, purify, and so forth and so on. And with that being said, it comes to a second idea, a second thought, I should say, and that's the prayer to the Afkalu, which is on page 205 in the, I believe it's the second part of the, give me a minute while I find it. I believe it's the Testimony of the Mad Arab Part 2, it is. Anyway, so from page 205 to 206, that prayer. Now, you're going to want to say that every morning you are, whenever you awake. Like, let's say you awake in the evening. Face the east or face the sun. Me personally, I just face the east when I say the prayer. Now, the reason why you want to do this is because for everything that you're working through, all the forces and powers that you apply yourself to, that you're working with, you're going to want these guys to be on your right hand. You're going to want them to be the ones that, keep the true destructive powers at bay, more or less, so that it is constructive, not destructive, in the pure sense of destruction. Because what we work with is constructive destruction. That being said and done, though, let's get on with the Urillia Text Explained. Ganzir is a broken star. It's a 5-point star that's been broken half, 2 halves. Okay. Now, 1 half represents Ganzir as the abyss, as the underworld, and 1 represents Ganzir as the otherworld. Now, what's important about this is that you have different practices with it. Okay, like for example, you have names, words, titles, so forth and so on, that equate to each part. Ganzir is underworld in the abyss, working with Erishkigal, and so forth and so on, and is described in the Descent of Anana, what have you. Well, it's important that when you're working with that particular aspect, that you know the offerings and so forth and so on. Now, let's start on page 198, referred to as the offering to the Queen of the Dead. Now, the book doesn't say that that's what it is, but that's exactly what it is, because if you'll read the previous page, where it says, "And when I set out bread for the dead to eat," remember, on page 197, on the very bottom of the page? Well, you start from that last paragraph on over until it comes to it, and it says, the offering. Bread of the cult of the dead, in its place I eat, and the court prepared. Water of the cult of dead, in its place I drink. A queen am I, who has become estranged in the cities. She that comes from the lowlands to a sunken boat am I. I am the virgin goddess, hostile to my city, the stranger in my streets. Misa gamina, uruma, berme, bensulami, germe, in. O Spirit, who understands thee, who comprehends thee. This is the prayer of offering to the Queen of the Dead, who is nameless, not to be confused with Erishkigal. This is the true Death Queen. But anyway, what you would do is you'd have bread and honey, and you would put honey on the bread, and then you would quote this, and then leave it into the Dur of Ender, the broken bowl, shattered bowl, into the fire. to give offering unto the Queen of the Dead. Now, you want to do this before you do any workings. Reason why is because it's always important to give your offerings first and foremost before any of your workings. But do you remember that conjuration of the Sorcerer's Cthulhu video that I made? Well, on page 195, that particular prayer is given. Now, this particular prayer is to call forth your holy guardian angel, your holy daemon, as it were. Okay? But now this exact same prayer can also be used to call up spirits of the dead, gods of the dead, so forth and so on. But before you do any of those workings, you want to give offering. And the offering is bread with honey poured thereupon and given to the fire that should be built or, inside the door of Ender of the broken shattered bowl. Okay. Well, with that being said and done, let us get on to the second half. There's, like I said, there are two parts of Ganzir. The second part is the other world of the ancient ones and so forth and so on. Not that the ancient ones don't also abide in Ganzir as the underworld, but in this particular sense, we're going to be working with the ancient ones such as Tiamat, Apsu, Kingu, and all those wonderful, wonderful beings and powers and forces. Plains of the Agigi and what have you. Okay. Now later on I will be doing videos on the 12 gates. But that is not tonight, or this morning, or today. So let's get on with it. So on page 199 to 200, it says, Hymn to the Ancient Ones. And in my notes I have this said when offering to the Ancient Ones. So, once again, using the same formula of giving the offering before the calling is always a good idea. Sorry about that. Trying to flip through books, notebooks, and everything else while doing this, that gets tricky. However, anyway, so what you want to do for this one is bread and blood. Now, you can use a lancet or however you draw blood and pour it upon the bread. And then you would give the calling on 199, 200. Now, what this does is it gives, because the blood is symbolic of the blood of Kingu, it is a fitting sacrifice, okay? And the bread will, for some reason, has to do something with the grain mysteries, which I'm not even going to attempt to go into. But bread was a symbol of food, okay? So in this case, so not just food for the body, but food for the soul. And in this sense, your blood. Your blood is the food of the soul. So forth and so on. Also, one of your secret powers. All right? And then on page 200 to 201, there was something that was left out in it. It says invocation of the power. You would use this before you would summon any of the deities or powers or forces of the Urillia, such as, Pazuzu, so forth and so on, and all the gods that are there, and demons and what have you. But now I wanted to show a correction in something. At the very bottom of page 200, it says, In Shurapak I summon thee to my aid, in I summon thee to my aid, in Nippur I summon thee to mine aid. In Eridu I summon thee to mine aid, in Kula I summon thee to mine aid, in Lagash I summon thee to mine aid. There is one that is missing. In Kesh I summon thee to mine aid. Now, it is my opinion that the reason this was left out was because it's funny, but when you leave out a key part, an important aspect of something, you don't quite get the full oomph of what you're doing. And I don't know if, when Simon was doing this, if he left it out on purpose, accident, what have you. But it's important that you know that it should be there. And then you would continue on page 201. Rise up, O powers, from the sea below all seas. Marutuk. From the grave beyond all graves. Cthulhu left. From the land of Til, Tishin, Nebo, Ishtar, Shamash, Nergal, Marduk, Adar, House of the waters of life, Pel, and Enkidu, hear me, Spirit of the seas, remember, Spirit of the graves, remember. And these parts, they're very important. For example, the invocation of the power on 200 to 201 is that later on when we go to giving the gate workings and callings with the 12 Azonai that lie beyond Ganzir or in Ganzir as Otherworld, this is the invocation that you'd be given to walk the gates, to work with the powers thereof of each one of the zodiac powers. That's why I'm putting this here, is so that you would also know, you're going to have to go into your handy-dandy book, and at the very bottom, you're going to have to write, "In Kesh, I summon thee to mine aid." Because you're going to want that in there. It's very important, because these are not just the names of the 7 stars and the Afkalu and what have you, but they're also important because they invoke the powers required to constructively walk this system. Like I said, whether it was done on purpose, on accident, I have no idea. But I do know that you want to put that in there. Later on, I will be doing videos on the actual Azanai and their actual gate designs and workings and so forth and so on. I know it's a really short video for it to be, the Urillia text explained. Well, sometimes it's that short, sometimes it's that easy. One of the things is that knowledge, as incomplete as it is complete, and as complete as it is incomplete. You have to fill in the spaces with the mindset, with the emotional state, the physical workspace, so forth and so on. Whether you do this meditatively, whether you do this ritually, whether you do it whatever, but you want to have the words, because words stir and summon a certain power. It transforms your energies into a particular type of energy. That's why it says, "Change not a word or a mark thereof." What they're trying to say is that, you need these parts, these pieces, because, they give you the access to those powers and those forces. I brought up a point about the only demons that you will encounter are the ones you bring with you. Let me further clarify that just a little bit if I can. It's kind of like in life. You can experience good things, you can experience bad things. Maybe something horrible happened to you in your childhood. Maybe it happened to you when you're older, whatever. These experiences, they're going to change you, they're going to mold you, and so forth and so on. But where you place them, do you seek to overcome them, or will they always constantly lie there, destroying you little by little? And that's what I mean by where you put something. I could go by all the crap that's happened to me in my life, and I choose to put it in a place of light so that I can heal it, so that I can overcome it. And it's where I place that. Because I could be a cynical, sarcastic asshole, know-it-all, and all this, that, and the other. And, and I could allow all the things that have happened to me and everything that I've gone through to turn me into a person that I do not choose to be. But when you put something into the light, what it means is that you're consciously choosing to deal with it, to work through it, to overcome it, to become its master so that it does not master you. And this is all something that I think is seriously overlooked in descriptions and explanations given by people who teach occult secrets, is the fact that they're like, "Oh, well, you'll figure it out, blah, blah, blah." Well, sometimes we do figure it out, and then sometimes we have a hard time dealing with things. And then we sit there and we're like, well, how do you overcome this? How do you overcome that? Even take, for example, the cryptic way I explained something about, where you put it and all this other stuff. And then I had to break it down and I had to say it's where you put it. Do you consciously deal with it and choose to work through it? Or do you just set it back and say, "Oh, I don't want to touch it, I don't want to deal with it," and pretend like it doesn't exist and that it's not there? Just because you don't consciously choose to deal with it doesn't mean it isn't there, doesn't mean it isn't affecting you or changing you or altering your world or your words. You never know. And that's why it's called the subconscious. That's why it's called the shadow. Is because it works in the background constantly. And so we as sorcerers and sorceresses, what we choose to do is to take our pain and turn it into our strength. Not necessarily to rule and reign over somebody and to tell people that they're stupid, but to actually be a living example of how you can take something negative and bad that's happened to you in your life, overcome it, transform it, change it, make your weakness your strength, so forth and so on. And this is all part of it should be a part of a cult curriculum, is the distillation of the shadow, the transformation of pain. For example, death itself is not an ending, and yes, it is just the beginning and all this, that, and the other. But I don't think of death as death. I think of death as just a transformation. So when they say there's life and death, and they're looking at it as polar opposites, as dualities, I don't. I think that life is everlasting, that exists always. But through transformation, it just changes its face into different forms. Therefore, there is no such thing as a beginning or an ending. There is no life and death. That in itself denotes duality and dual thinking. And I can't bring myself to do that, because when you're on a path of immortality, when you're on a path of ascension, when you're on a path of evolution, of becoming, and so forth and so on, you have to change the way you think. I've said this before, but you have to change the definitions of the words you use. You have to change the language. You have to transform it into something that is powerful and uplifting and transformative for you. So, life exists eternally. And death is not death. It is not an ending, but is a continual transformative process. Therefore, in my particular world, there's no such thing as a birth and a death, a beginning and an ending. Because instead of looking at it in a finite sense, I look at it as an infinite loop. The serpent biting its own tail. There will be lots of people who disagree with me, argue with me, and that's fine. To each their own. Everybody's allowed and welcome their own opinion. But this is what I use, so that when I read text, when I work with certain powers and things, if I change the way I look at them, the way I view them, I then am able to see a little clearer, a little better, exactly what it is that Spirit truly has to show us. And that doesn't make it light or dark, good or evil, right or wrong. It just is. It is what it is. Knowledge is power. And the more knowledge you have, the stronger you are. The stronger you are, the more capable you are. The more capable you are, the more you should be doing. Whether achieving or overcoming. This is a new year. This is a year of manifestation, of completion. Let your works be made perfect. Let them be made perfect in the flames of knowledge, of gnosis, of understanding and wisdom. Let them be combined. Let them be combined with the works of your hands. And in this sense, then you truly do manifest anything and everything that you want in your life. And this is where the Urillia text explained comes in, is that as we explore further into this world, we're realizing that to be able to pass beyond, we have to let go of the way that we were taught to think, the way that we think, the way that we, process. We have to change it. Well, the processing of it is the transformational stage. But the thing that we have to change is the way that we look at the definitions of certain words. When we change them to include something deeper and more meaningful, it will lose, language will lose its meaning, and then and only then will silence speak volumes. And I think that's about as cryptic as I can get for this time of the morning. I wish each and every single one of you peace and blessings from the Black Tower. Hail and farewell.